cause I can do it my way. Me making music's like shooting hoops in the driveway.
Welcome to Mastered with Mike. This is a podcast where we talk to everyday people, regular people who do something extraordinary with their side projects, their hobbies, their passions. Today we have on Brian Weinstein, a coworker, a friend, and somebody who until recently I didn't realize had a podcast empire of sorts. He is a very, very talented podcaster with a podcast called Attendance Bias that follows the band Phish. So, Brian, welcome to the show. I just did your podcast recently. It was super fun. It was really interesting, and I thought it was a very cool type of podcast where you focus on one show and you kind of dig into it. You go into the depth of it. So, Brian, welcome to the show, Brian. I want to hear the origin story of your life. So take it from there, Brian. How did you get into podcasting? How did you get into teaching? Who are you? Tell me who Brian Weinstein is.
Well, thanks, Mike, for having me. As you can see, I am cozy in my podcast empire, which is the second bedroom of my two-bedroom apartment in Queens, surrounded by discarded DVDs and otherwise physical media. But I don't have much of a life story, but the short version of it is I was born and raised on the South Shore of Long Island, very close to where you currently reside.
Yes, sir.
Grew up there, went to high school in a town called Belmore, and
My town.
Your town.
Right now.
Yeah, and went to college at SUNY Buffalo. Somewhere along that line, before college, I got into the band Phish, Phish, for anyone listening who may not know. And they've been with me through 2 marriages, several different jobs up to the current point. And so they've been there for me when no one else was, longer than most constants in my life. And so eventually I decided to start a podcast about them because it seemed to be the thing to do at the time.
So that's awesome. First, I want to say, first of all, that a lot of the people I've interviewed and will be interviewing are teachers. And I feel like there's something about the job of teaching that is a little different than your typical 9 to 5. You need to be creative. You need to be able to pivot on a moment's notice. And I think just as a teacher myself, I feel like it's a job that makes you think a lot more than you think you would need to. You know, people might think, okay, I learned the curriculum, I teach XYZ, repeat. Whereas, you know, you're constantly making up new curriculum, new activities. No 2 days are alike. So it speaks to why so many of my guests on this podcast are teachers, because it just seems like they have a creative outlet, a creative spark that just plays well into taking your side project hobby and turning it into something super duper cool. So I love that. What was the first time that you realized that Phish was going to be a band, a lifestyle that was going to take you through so many rip-corded areas of your life where you had to rinse, repeat, and reset? When did you first start seeing Phish and listening to Phish?
Well, those are 2 different questions. So the first time I started listening to Phish was, I believe, the summer of 1996. So I was 13 years old.
Nice.
And I was in a summer camp in Massachusetts, which is how a lot of Phish fans begin their story and answer this question. It's always at a summer camp in Massachusetts or upstate New York. And we were on a field trip to Mount Washington in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. And it's a long drive. It's like a 4.5-hour drive from where the camp was to Mount Washington. And I was the type of person who had like books of 100 CDs, the old Case Logic, like slip disc.
Nice.
So I would bring like the mini version of that, like 50 discs, even though it's only a 4-hour drive and I'm going to be in a van full of other peers. So one would think you're just going to talk to other people, but no, I need to have my Discman, or my Walkman, depending on, you know, what I brought to camp that year. And I was listening to music, so I brought a bunch, but during an interim where I wasn't listening to my own music, the counselor, a really great guy named Mike Kasparian, put on Phish's 1992 album, A Picture of Nectar. And he put it in the van CD player, and every song I felt like I wanted to hear more than the song that played before it. It's a long album too. It's like 16 tracks. So every song that played, I wanted to hear the next one. I was so automatically enveloped in it to the point where after the disc was over, I would ask him, can you play it again and again and again? And so I became obsessed with this band that I only knew right now through someone else. Of course, I'd heard their name before, but I didn't really know much about them. So when I got home from camp that August, I went straight to the Roosevelt Field shopping mall in
Ooh.
Garden City, and they had a Sam Goody in the basement on the bottom floor, and it was an enormous store, enormous. So I went down there and I went right there. They had a picture of Nectar, and it was an outrageous price. It was $18.99
Oh,
for this.
geez.
It was expensive. Most discs were $14.99 or $15.99, but I bought it, and that became the soundtrack for pretty much the rest of my life. So I became obsessed with Phish for years. They were playing that upcoming October 1996 at Madison Square Garden. By that point, I had just turned 14. And so
Nice.
I wanted to go, and my mom and dad would not let me. It was October 21st and 22nd, 1996. They would not let me go because it was a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and it was during school. So they wouldn't
Ooh.
let me go back to back. They didn't understand that Phish plays different shows every night. So why see the same band twice in a row? And you're not going to Madison Square Garden by yourself as a 14-year-old to see this drug band, as they were assumed to be at the time, in the
Of
middle of the
course.
school. I spent the whole year, the whole intervening year, just absorbing everything I could. I would go to every bookstore I could find and look under nonfiction, entertainment, music, Phish. And they only had like 2 books out about them that were like fan published, right? They're not like they weren't a
Is
big
that
group then.
is that PH fan?
Yeah, well, I try not to, but at the time, yes, it was still cool to say that. But I tried to learn everything I could, and then I learned in a nearby town called Rockville Center. If
Ooh.
you go just north of a main road called Sunrise Highway, just about a half mile or even a little bit less, there was a head shop, which was a new concept to me at the time, called Prime Cuts.
I do love Prime Cuts.
Have you been to Prime Cuts?
That's where I bought all my Primus albums there. That and Columbia House, the Columbia House Club. Mostly I got my Rush there. I got my completely random free CDs that I don't think I ever paid for. I probably owe Columbia House thousands of dollars at this point. But yeah, Prime Cuts was the coolest place because they had all the bootlegs.
Well, that's the thing. That's what differentiated them from every other head shop that you could go anywhere and find. Is in the back, they had a bunch of binders, like 1/4-inch binders. And in those binders, there would be different sheets of paper in plastic, what do you call them? Like plastic.
Yeah, like the
Yeah.
sleeves, right? The
Yeah,
laminated.
sleeves. Yeah, laminated
Yeah.
sleeves would have set lists. They would have band set lists, and they were color coded. And you would get an index card and a pencil, and you would write down what band, what set of music you were looking for, because each tape was a different set, and what date it was played on. You'd bring it to the front. The person working at the front would go into the mysterious back of Prime Cuts, and then they would bring you that live show on tape. So this was at the time not permitted according to like Phish's official taping policy. But
Oh, yeah.
I have since learned that they had like a tacit agreement with Phish's management that they were allowed to do it. They just couldn't advertise it.
First of all, that is one of my favorite things about Phish also, is that you can go back and revisit so many shows. And truthfully, we spoke about this not that long ago, but I used to be a Phish album guy back in the day, in the beginning of my Phish fandom. Now, like you said, it's a band that no 2 shows are the same. It's such an awesome community of people that almost like scientifically dig through each show and plot and graph and can dig into this rich history, much like the Grateful Dead, but really Grateful Dead for our generation. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's kind of how it is. It used to be that Phish would be considered like a prog rock band of our generation. Patterns, who love statistics, who love to
Yeah.
guess about what's going to happen next based on past performances, and it matches up.
For sure, it does.
Yeah. So I was going to Prime Cuts. I would babysit, and I would get like a 20 for babysitting, like $20, and I would take the train from my town, Merrick, about 3 or 4 Long Island Railroad stops over to Rockville Center, get off the train, walk up to Prime Cuts, get a slice of pizza from Gino's right
Ooh.
next door, get his grandma slice,
Oh,
spend
yeah.
whatever money I had left, get tapes, and then hide in the train bathroom for 3 stops on the way back so I didn't have to pay. I'm a fare evader. And then my friend Craig and I would go to his house and just dub the tapes that each one of us got. So we would come back with double the amount of tapes that we originally purchased. And so I spent that whole calendar year of 1997 digging into Phish, learning more about them, reading up on them. The burgeoning internet was providing me with some information, though it's nowhere
Wow.
near where it was now. And then I first saw them on December 29th, 1997 at Madison Square Garden.
Dude, that is a awesome Phish origin story. And let me ask you a question. Were you a Napster guy? Did you steal all of the possible live recordings you could have from Napster? Because I mean, for those of you listening that are not of our generation, there was a time when we didn't pay for any music whatsoever at all.
Well, I was, but this was way before Napster. Napster was like 1999, 2000, and then it, changed into Kazaa and then LimeWire and all these once the file sharing genie got out of the bottle, that was it. But I did not use Napster or LimeWire or any file sharing really for Phish because people are stupid and are terrible at labeling files.
True.
And you never knew what you were getting. And there were times when you would have to wait like 6 hours to download one song. And then it wouldn't be the song that you thought you were downloading. So I didn't trust it for Phish.
Phish is important to you, obviously. And, I think I ruined probably 5 computers with the viruses downloading God knows what from where. But, it's funny, we spoke about this recently, but my entree into Phish was much, much later in life. I mean, I can say that they're one of my favorite bands, and it's a band that never disappoints, even though if you read the critique sometime, it does disappoint some people. But even though, like, it's like a good buddy that sometimes you're disappointed in them, but they still show up to Christmas Day, and they're always there. They're there for you in your ups and downs. I feel like Phish for me was always that band that your buddy's older brother in high school had, and you'd put this on, and it was like kind of akin to like a Zappa or something really, really cool and eclectic where Phish can be the kind of band where you can pick and choose your kind of musical style, and I guarantee that they do at least 1 or 2 songs like that style, whether it's reggae or blues or prog rock or even Pink Floyd-esque music. So it's a band and a group that keeps on giving year after year until, and I forget, how long were they on hiatus for?
Well, they had 2 hiati. They had one where they went on hiatus in the fall of 2000 and then came back in New Year's Eve 2002. So it was like a year and a half about that they were on hiatus. And I was very disappointed at that time as the fall of 2000 was when I first got to college. And I was like, okay, great. This is the time where I don't really need to be responsible. And I could just find 4 other people and hop in a car and we could drive anywhere to go see Phish and drop everything. And they announced, oh, we're not going to be on tour until the indefinite future. And I was like, great. So that was
what did you do? What did you do? Who did you see in that time period when this band was not playing at all?
We have not enough time to go over that because when Phish is off tour, between, I would say, the Grateful Dead, who had been off, Jerry Garcia had been dead for about 5 years at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And the Allman Brothers were together, but they kind of had a mix and match lineup. It wasn't always the same people. And so when Phish was the powerhouse, kind of the only arena filling game in town, jam band wise and improvisational rock wise. So when they also left the scene, 1 billion bands flooded the scene, and none of them were popular enough to fill, let's say, Madison Square Garden or whatever arena is in your town. So it was very easy to see live music in any club in any major to minor to 3rd tier city in America for like 5 to 7 nights a week for like $15 at the most usually. So just as an example, so bands like the Disco Biscuits or Dark Star Orchestra, which was a Grateful Dead cover band, Mo, who had been around for quite a while, the String Cheese Incident.
We saw Mo quite a few times in college. Where are you on Widespread Panic? That's my question.
They are good enough for me. I don't go out of my way to see them. There's a very stark line, and it's called the Mason-Dixon line, of people who really love Widespread and people who are fairly ambivalent to them. I'm firmly on the north side of the Mason-Dixon, where I'm kind of ambivalent. I don't dislike them for any reason, and I have friends who are, they'll go to the wall for Widespread, but I've seen them, I think, twice, maybe 3 times. And each time I could just feel like, all right, you ready to go? Like I could go then feel like I'm not missing anything.
Right. So, okay, you are a Phish fan. They're back from hiatus. You're seeing them. At what point do you get your teaching job? When did you start teaching?
Well, this is, we got a little distracted because they went on hiatus a second time, and then I'll answer. But that's part of this question. So they went on hiatus a second time, which they called, it was a breakup. It wasn't a hiatus. And I'm an English teacher, so I'm very big on semantics. So the first time was a hiatus where they said we'll be back at some point. The second time, in 2004, August 2004, they were playing a huge festival in Vermont that they broke up. They announced as their last shows.
Oh God.
So
How
they were,
disappointing.
well, and it was a very disappointing show. They played very poorly. And so they broke up officially in August 2004. And then the next show that they played was in March 2009.
Wow.
So that was about 5 years.
And that show was that in Maine? Where was that?
No, that was in Vermont. It was in a town called Coventry.
Oh, yes. I mean, I know from my brother's disappointment that Coventry was one that was number one, not a great show, right? And then number 2 was their swan song.
Yes.
So, okay.
So in between, during that 5-year gap, though, that's when I graduated college. That's when I went and got a bunch of odd jobs and got my master's degree in education.
Mhm.
And in 2000, I started substitute teaching in 2006. So not too long after they broke up, and then got my full-time job in the fall of 2007, the same job I have now.
Right. And then I believe that were we working together at that time? Like that was your first year was when I was working at the middle school, correct?
Yes.
I believe it was. Yeah. Again, now you're an English teacher. You have this Phish bordering on obsession. That's fine. Good obsessions are good. I like obsessions. At what point do podcasts become even popular? I remember getting my iPhone 1 or even my the iPod, right? The white iPod, and I remember downloading MP3s onto it, and they were just these little kind of talk shows, mostly populated by ghost stories and probably alt-right weird things.
It's funny you asked that because in 2004, right after Phish broke up, I think it was, or right before they broke up, my college roommate, Craig, and his friend, Elliot, started a podcast. This
Nice.
This is years ago. This is over a decade ago, right? This is, if I do my math correctly, this is 21 years ago.
Wow.
They started a podcast, and it was really fun, and it was very basic, and they called it Trapped in Time, which is a phrase from a Phish song. What they did was, their premise was they would play a jam or a song by Phish, and then they would just talk about it. But they were like one of 3 podcasts, period. But they were terrible podcast hosts. Like they would play the song, and then one of them would be like, that was awesome. And it was like crazy show. And then the other one, the other host would be like, yeah, no, I thought it was awesome too.
Remember that time?
Yeah, it was, if you remember in the Wayne's World movie, when Wayne walks off the set and it's only Garth and he's like, I'm having a good time. And he has like a freak out. That's what it sounded like. But that's when podcasts, I guess in the early to mid 2000s, I guess around 2007, 2008 is when they became a phrase that you could say to someone and they would know what you're talking about. It's like a radio show.
You know, it's funny. I often go back, and I don't remember if this is true or not, but I believe that, Apple, the iPod, did Apple coin the term podcast?
Yes, that's where it comes from.
Right?
Yes.
Wow. They don't get enough credit for what they do. That Apple, they're going places. I'm telling you, stick with them. Stick with them for sure. So now you're a Phish fan. Your friends had a lackluster but cool podcast. At what point do you decide that you're going to start a podcast?
We have to fast forward well over a decade for that.
Okay.
So my podcast was a pandemic project.
as so
And
many things were.
yeah, and depending on how much longer people wait to listen to this episode we're recording now, they might not even know what that means. You know,
True.
it was such
True.
an event and time specific phrase. But I live in Queens and I live not too far from Elmont Hospital. And at the peak of the COVID pandemic, that was where ground zero was. That was where, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically was where
Yeah.
when people who were sick, but there was no treatment for them, people would
Right.
bring them to Elmont and we would just hear sirens. My wife and I mean, like just ambulance sirens over like all day, all night, people going to and from the hospital. So during the day, everything was shut down in New York City, like literally everything except a few restaurants had to-go windows that were open. It was like going to McDonald's, except you could get any food from that restaurant, including margaritas, by the way, which was awesome. So all I was doing at that time, besides teaching from home, was walking my dog in circles, like to nowhere, because we had nowhere to go. And I was just learning every street of my neighborhood. And I had not listened to podcasts before 2020, right? We're talking about the spring of 2020. And I needed something to listen to other than music when I was walking my dog.
Right.
And when I went on Apple's podcast app, I knew a couple by name, but I realized there was a way you could search by topic. So I searched by Phish, and there were like 4, which is good enough, you know, for most topics. Sure, about one band, one underground band, you know, like that's more than enough. But none of them had what I wanted. And what I wanted were just stories from people who go to Phish shows and what was your favorite show and what was something you remember about it, a show that you were emotionally connected to, because a lot of them were very professionally produced, which is not a criticism at all. It's just not what I was looking for. And so what I started doing, because there was nothing on the horizon, it was just an endless horizon of nothing, basically, during the COVID pandemic. No one knew when anything was going to reopen. Every day was like 29 hours instead of 24 hours. Like time ended, basically. So I thought, why don't I be the change I want to see in the world? Like, if this is the podcast I want to hear, I want to create it. I miss my friends who I should be meeting up with or making plans with for summer tour. There is no summer tour coming up. So I listened to a podcast that no longer exists, but it's very meta, very Inception. It's very a podcast about how to make a podcast.
Wow. I mean, I wish I listened to that before we did this. Because I'm just flying by the seat of my pants here. And thank God for technology. Thank God that it is, relatively simple now to create it. But I imagine back then, I mean, I don't know that we had the same type of technology we have right now. So what was the podcast called? If you don't mind me asking,
I don't remember. I would have to search a little bit. I think she's actually the host, changed the name of it since then. So I stopped listening because she changed her focus. She's an expat living in Europe, I forget where, and her whole thing was how to create a successful podcast. And then eventually she just shifted the whole focus to what's it like living in another country when you were raised in one country. And like, that's a great focus, but it's not what I needed anymore. So I forgot the name of it.
Say she's a digital nomad, which sounds like an awesome way to live. So, okay, you decide you're going to be the change you want to see in the world. You ostensibly buy a whole bunch of equipment and you press play. Was your podcast always called Attendance Bias? And tell us a little bit about what your show is.
So yes, it is called Attendance Bias and always has been. And what it basically is what I just described. It's people who enjoy the music of Phish and who have seen them live and who have a story to tell. And I just ask them a bunch of questions about their profile as a Phish fan, because everybody is different and everybody has a different experience at Phish, because every show is different. So everyone's experience is subjective. So I just ask them, who are you? Like basic questions like, when was your first show? What's your favorite song? Where do you live? Like, just profile stuff to get to know the guest. And then depending on what their preference is, we either focus on a single song or a single jam that the band played and they were there to see and experience, or sometimes they want to go over a full show, song by song, and we do it that way. And so it's a very simple premise.
Well, as being a guest on your podcast, I will tell you that it's a really cool premise. And I think we don't have a lot of shows with a very specific mission statement, kind of like yours, where it's cool to live within a certain set of criteria on a show. It actually, as a guest on your show, it was really helpful to know that, this is the idea. We're not gonna say, hey, that was an awesome show, right? Love that jam. You had very specific questions. You provided me with a nice framework to work in. So I thought it was pretty fantastic. But so what was your first show? Who did you interview for your first show? Or was it even an interview show?
It was an interview show. I had a pretty strong vision of what I wanted it to be right from the beginning. I did bounce ideas off friends because, again, at the time, the spring of 2020, no one was socializing. Very few people were going to work. Even if they were still working, people were not leaving the house. People were making sourdough bread, right? And they were having meetups with people on Zoom that people they would never otherwise speak to.
True.
So it was easy to access people and to talk to people and just bounce ideas off them. So I always knew I wanted it to be a storytelling show. As a middle school English teacher, this is going to sound kind of pretentious, but I wanted it to be the Phish version of The Giver. I wanted
Oh,
like a collective memory
yeah.
of what it's like to go to a Phish show from right now. I think I have something like 200 something episodes. I wanted it to be like a collective memory of however many people can tell what it's like for them. So if you, let's say Mike Radicone, a new fan who is just learning about the band, you want to know what it's like to go to a show because there's no one, they're not playing near you in the near future. Well, who can I hear from rather than going on Reddit where people's sarcasm is in overdrive? And there's a place for that, especially in the Phish community. But if you just want to hear a honest, straightforward, earnest explanation of what it's like to go to a show, that's what I wanted my podcast to be.
And I'll tell you that as a now avid listener of your show, and I've listened to a lot, not all 200, but a lot of your episodes, that is exactly what you get. And you interview everyone from people that are, large in the Phish-sphere to financial advisors to, everybody. And each person brings their own kind of unique point of view, POV, to the show. And it's really a great show. I listened to a bunch of them, in preparation for our interview. But I remember the first time I knew you had a podcast, and we'd been friends for a long time, and I didn't know you had a podcast. My brothers, who are gigantic Phish fans, more so than I am even, had been listening to your show. And, we've met up a bunch of times before New Year's shows or New Year's run shows. I remember my brother Chris, my youngest brother, said, hey, you know that Brian Weinstein's got a podcast? And I was like, really? I didn't know that. And then I listened to it. I was like, wow, number one, you're very good at it. And number two, Chris, my youngest brother, being the fan that he is, and he's a very, very opinionated person when it comes to Phish, and he doesn't like junk. He likes good quality products, and he gives you the stamp of approval. So I knew it must have been something worthwhile. And he has since brought many, many of your episodes to me. So it's a great podcast. So, okay, your first show, tell me about it. How did it go? What did you do? Take it from there.
My first show was not necessarily my first interview. My
Mhm.
first interviews, because I tried to, in podcasting, you call it, you batch them. It's pretty much getting a bunch in the can. So
Mhm.
that if you're, let's say, releasing an episode every week, you're not rushing each week like the guys from South Park do to get an
Right.
episode together. I wanted to have a whole bunch already recorded in the can so that I could continue to record, but be like, let's say, 2 months ahead of my release schedule. So the first thing I did was contact a whole bunch of my friends and just be like, hey, can you do me a favor? I'm starting up this hobby. Would you mind being interviewed about a Phish show? And you tell me which one. So you are in your comfort zone. So I'm not just like interrogating you. It's you telling me the story that you would tell. And so I had a whole bunch of friends do that, which was great. But the first episode that I released, I thought it was important from a not political, but like PR kind of standpoint,
Mhm.
was Sirius XM Phish radio DJ Elisa Alashant.
Wow. Wow. You were shooting for the moon there, buddy.
Well, I found out during, again, this is going to be a recurring theme because you're asking me about the origins of it. During COVID, everybody was accessible online. Everybody. All you had to do was send them an Instagram message. And unless you're really going for like really top tier celebrities, offense to Elisa, she is not a top tier celebrity. It's not, I'm not asking Taylor Swift to be on the show, but She just wrote back, sure. That sounds like
That's
fun.
awesome.
She just had to check with Sirius XM, and she said she had two stipulations. She just couldn't answer any questions about Sirius XM, or
Hmm.
she couldn't be the person, like I couldn't interview her as a Phish radio host, Elisa Alashon. I just had to treat her like any other fan.
Well, that means, first of all,
That's
that's super
better.
cool. That's great. Yeah, because then I would think it would take away some of the. I would be relatively nervous to interview someone that I would consider, probably a mid-tier celebrity-esque person. So if you're just talking fan to fan, it must have been a much easier process.
Well, that's the thing. Well, whoever I reach out to, I never get nervous before my interviews because no matter who they are, I'm speaking to them as a Phish fan. And I don't mean this in a competitive way, but I can go toe to toe with anybody
Yeah.
that talking about Phish. I could talk to a complete stranger, which I do at shows about the band. And so that's kind of the same energy that I try to bring to my episodes as a
So
host.
at what point did you realize that this show you've mastered the art, as we say, mastered the art of the podcast? When was that flip for you, that switch?
I don't know that I ever have. It's kind of against my nature to say that I've mastered the art of anything. I've had imposter syndrome my entire life for everything I've ever done. But I know that when I interviewed Tom Marshall, who is the big time Phish lyricist, he writes the lyrics for a lot of the band's songs. And he was very casual. He didn't say anything disparaging. He didn't give me any tips, like nothing. And that's not his personality anyway. But I felt comfortable speaking to this guy who hosts or owns his own podcast network. And I
That's
felt pretty confident in that way.
that's pretty cool. That is, knowing myself, knowing Tom Marshall, that's a pretty large get, I would think. Uh, Let me ask you a question here. When you started doing this, did your friends take you seriously? Where they were like, "That's ridiculous. Like, what are you doing this for?"
I
How
didn't
did
tell
you?
most of my friends. I didn't tell most of them. That's one of the reasons you probably didn't know.
Right.
Most of my friends aren't into Phish. So I figured, why would they care? Like, this is not their purview. Yeah. You and I both probably have a lot of friends, right? I'm in my early 40s,
I'm in
right?
my
You're
late 40s.
late 40s, right? So I'm sure we have a lot of friends who are the actual subjects of your podcast, right? People who are trying something different or side gigs or
Hmm.
trying a new hobby and they want everyone to like it. Everyone, check this out, my first episode of whatever. Or they get hooked into these pyramid schemes of trying to sell these
Yes.
wellness pills or whatever they are. Like,
Right. Right.
and I think when you mix your personal life with that, you're playing a dangerous game because then if someone doesn't listen to your podcast or someone says they don't like it because you ask them for feedback, now it's a personal rejection of you. And
Hmm.
it's not a preference thing. It's they just said no to you and you put your passion and this is your passion. This is your
Yeah.
this is something you love doing. So
Yep.
I didn't want to go through that. I'm like, let me put it out to the Phish community and let's see what they say because that's my audience, not all my friends.
And what did the Phish community say? How was your response been?
Generally pretty good. I think that it's small enough that the people who listen only want to listen. Like no one is
Right.
going out of their way to listen. It's part of their routine from the feedback that I've gotten. And like your brother, they'll tell someone else. That's what's great about Phish. And that's how I got those tapes. You learn about it from your camp counselor. You learn about it from your friend or your older brother who used to be into Zappa, a couple
Yeah.
generations ago.
Yep. Yep.
It's word of mouth. So anyone who's telling someone about it must be doing so for a good reason because they enjoy it. So when I say the Phish community, it's not really one community. Like it's so like everything else in the world with social media, it's so fractured and everything is so in even its own sub community of within this larger piece. I guess it's positive. I mean, I'll say what you should say at every episode that you have, Mike. If you like Attendance Bias, leave a rating and a review on your favorite podcast app. And you can go
Hmm.
to www.buymeacoffee.com/attendance bias and donate anything you can to keep it running.
We'll keep the lights on for sure.
Yeah.
My large audience, depends on when this show comes out, but my large audience will definitely support your coffee and your podcast. So, okay, you're 200 episodes deep, so around there. You're enjoying this, obviously. You can tell by the shows that it's something you like to do. How much time do you dedicate to this? How much goes into your podcast life?
A lot. A lot. Like, I haven't even told my parents or like,
Really?
yeah, I don't want them digging into this and my mom calling me about it. Like, I want to keep this as my own thing. So the reason I bring that up is because sometimes when I speak to my parents, like during the week, they're like, "Oh, what did you do this weekend?" And the real answer is, "Oh, I've recorded an episode and spent the rest of Saturday editing it. And it was 8 p.m. by the time it was over." So it's like, I don't know, just hung out.
Right.
And that's it, because I do put a lot of time into it. There's a very long from the beginning of an episode to the end of an episode before you hear it as a listener, a tremendous amount of work and literal time goes into making it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, this being one of my first few episodes, people might think you just press play and record and that's it, but quite a bit does go into it, from research beforehand to editing afterwards to coming up with that perfect intro to, there's a lot. And I would imagine, especially for me and probably for you too, but if you didn't love doing it, it would become a chore. Um, and do you feel like it's a chore at this point, or are you still loving doing it?
Well, I love doing it, but well, first of all, the whole idea of a listener pressing play and feeling like it just fell out of the sky into their ears. If you did a good job, that's what it should be like. You
Hmm.
know, in high school, I was in the drama club, and the crew. I'll never forget. The director said to the crew, "The curse of being a crew member on a stage play is that if you all do your jobs perfectly, no one will ever know you exist."
That is a good. That's actually very cool. And having friends that are friends and family that are in the entertainment industry, they actually do write and direct and record podcasts. There is a tremendous amount of work that goes into it. It's funny, my cousin Brian, who he and his brother John are professional podcast creators. They work with like Paul Giamatti and all sorts of anybody from the CEO of Walmart to people that want to create a podcast. And the amount of work that goes into it is crazy, especially if you want to make it professional, right? So I let my cousin know that I was doing this, and from the get-go, he's like, "Well, do you need a Mac Mini? What kind of music are you using?" I was like, whoa, I don't know about these things. So, and so there's a lot, especially if you want it to sound good and want it to sound like it's very seamless. So that is something I'm learning right now about it.
Well, that's how when I started, when I was listening to that podcast about creating a podcast,
Hmm.
it was very well broken down. I'll get you the name of it after we're
Yeah,
finished
sure.
recording, but it breaks down what do you need equipment wise? How do you select your guests if it's an interview podcast, or is it an interview podcast at all? Is it a storytelling podcast? Do you need a co-host? If so, how are you going to communicate? And like there's like this infinitesimal, not an infinite number of decisions and choices that you have in front of you that need to be made. And like any hobby, it requires a lot of money and a
Hmm.
lot of startup to get going. So, what you were just saying before, the amount of time it takes. So, let's say I get in contact with a guest or a guest reaches out to me. And if anyone here listening is a big fan of Phish, please reach out to me, attendancebias@gmail.com. If you ever want to, if you have a good story to tell, leave it there. So, finding a guest or contacting a guest, selecting which jam or show that they want to discuss. Once we decide that, I have to write up, because this is how I work, this is my process,
Hmm.
write up an enormous Google Doc of interview questions. And then I listen to the show. And a Phish show on average is about 3 hours.
Hmm.
So that's 3 hours of listening, plus the times I have to pause and jot down notes of things I want to discuss as if I had just listened to it when I'm talking to the guest. So there's that time investment. And so that's 3+ hours. And then there's the actual recording, which usually goes about an hour to an hour and a half, depending on the guest, because Phish fans can go deep, very deep.
Yep.
And then after that, editing, which takes about twice as long as the recording is, depending on the length of the recording.
And what do you use? I mean, now we're getting to the weeds now about product, and we'll get back on track in a second. But what platform do you typically use to record your shows?
So I use several
Hmm.
platforms. So I use Zoom to record, which
Hmm.
most people I imagine are familiar with, just a very straightforward talk recording video program. And then I upload the audio, because I don't do video podcasts, to a program called Descript. And what Descript does is it takes an audio file and it transcribes it into what effectively looks like a Microsoft Word document.
Ah, nice.
And so I edit the audio file on screen as though it's a Microsoft Word document. So
Oh,
I edit
wow.
the words, and simultaneously, when I highlight and hit delete of, like, let's say 3 words, the audio file, the program will delete that segment from the audio file.
Wow. I'm taking notes
Because
right now, by the way.
that it well, it's an amazing program, and it speaks to how I process, how I work, because I was an English major in college, and my favorite thing to do was to edit. I like writing,
Really?
but I love editing. I love shaping a story or shaping an email or shaping whatever it is that I'm asked to edit. So that spoke to my sensibilities. Once I have that done, I export it to my desktop or my desktop of my computer, and then it's a WAV file, and then I upload that into a podcast hosting website called Buzzsprout.
Okay.
And then I just kind of have to jigger the details of what I want to call it, what the show notes look like, when I want it to air, and stuff like that.
Dude, I mean, that is quite the process. And so, part of what I want to dig into here for a second is, look, I've had a lot of hobbies that I've, maybe at one point or another tried to turn into something bigger. Many years ago, I created a IEP data collection app called Datability Web, which actually is used in a lot of different districts. And that's been around now for about 5 years. www.iepdata.com if you want to get into, if you're a special ed teacher out there.
Was that a pandemic project?
That actually, it really took off during the pandemic. I started it probably a year before that. Just as an aside, I'm a special ed teacher, and I am not a very organized person. And you have to collect a lot of data as a special ed teacher. Legally, you have to collect data on goals. And so I remember I was working at probably the middle school at the time, and we got iPads. And I said to myself, ooh, great. I don't like collecting paper and pencil data. There's got to be an app out there to help me do this. And my TA, Margie Gilbert, shout out Margie Gilbert, said, Mike, I don't think there's anything out there like that. Why don't you just create it? And I said, great.
Be the change you want to see in the world, right?
Be the change you want to see in the world. And I have to shout out my dad, Mike Radicone, the OG master. He's a man that can create magic out of dust. He was a dental salesman. Now he's an inventor. He's got a ton of patents. And in the beginning, I said to him, look, I want to create this thing. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. And he said, there's something very heady about creating something that you pulled out of nothing, and it's out in the ether. So whether it fails or is wildly successful, there's something really cool about making something. And so that's kind of the way I've lived my life, from then on. I did create it, and it is pretty successful. However, this is something I want to dig into, is that I frequently lose motivation on it, right? Like, it's there. I made it. I have to put time into it. I have to pay attention to it like a baby, or else it doesn't go anywhere. You have to advertise it. You have to do constant outreach. There's a lot of cold calling involved. So, this is something I struggle with a lot, probably because I have ADHD and I lose motivation on things a lot. But how do you deal with the ebbs and flows of motivation for the podcast?
It's tough because when I'm in it, I'm all in. And then it's like going to the gym. And then once you take 1 or 2 days off, it becomes easier to take that 3rd day off.
Yeah.
And then it's easier to take that 4th day off. And then, oh, this will be a cheat day, And so the more time I take off, the harder it is to get back into it. But when I'm in it, it's my favorite thing in the world. So what makes it really hard, where I do lose motivation, is when people are not responsive. When someone reaches out to me and says, I want to be on your podcast. I have a great story to tell about insert show date here.
Right.
I go, oh my God, great, let's do it. So they give me the date, spend hours taking notes and listening to the show, and then they disappear. They
I've dealt with that already.
And I'm like, motherfucker, why would you bother in the first place? Because the strength and the weakness of my podcast is that it's based on the guest.
Right.
Because I'm talking about someone else's experience. So if they don't bring it, then it's completely up to me to make it a listenable show. I always try and think about it from my listeners. So when it comes to speaking to someone who is as passionate about Phish and going to the show as I am, it's the easiest thing in the whole wide world. And I wish I could do it every day. But when I speak to someone where it's a slog to get their attention and to get a response from them and to set up a date, and then the date of the recording, I'm sorry. And it's like 25 minutes before we're about to hit record. And they say, oh, sorry, can't make it. Could we reschedule? It's like, God, why? But like,
No.
that is the most disheartening part because I did all the work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very upsetting. And that's when I lose my motivation, when it's like I put so much into, and I'm seeing parallels of teaching right here, actually, as I'm speaking
Yeah.
aloud, when I put so much into it and the person I'm supposed to be helping doesn't put forth more than 1%, it's just like, why am I bothering? And I don't get a paycheck or health insurance for this, at least teach.
That's true. There are built-in pluses to teaching. So do you keep yourself to a schedule? Like how many shows do you like to have kind of in the can before you start releasing? What's your schedule like?
I try to stay at least a month ahead. So my episodes are released every other week. Typically. Sometimes there'll be like a bonus episode, like if Phish plays, like they play Madison Square Garden 4 nights every New Year's Eve. And normally I go to 3 out of the 4 nights and I'll do a recap on like January 1st or January 2nd, like a lot of podcasts, Phish podcasts do, but that'll be whenever it happens to land. That's when it's released. But throughout most of the year, it's every other week. It's a bi-weekly podcast. And when Phish is on tour, like during certain parts of the summer or maybe the fall, depending on the year, I don't release any new episodes because
Okay.
I've looked at my data and my listenership drops completely when Phish is on tour, which makes
Wow.
sense because people don't
Yeah.
want to hear about a show from 1996 when they could talk about last night's show.
That is crazy. Now, have you ever kind of been the man on the street at a show and tried to record, at a show?
No, I don't want to do that while I'm supposed to be enjoying the show.
Right.
That's the part of it. I would not have attendance bias. My focus would be too split.
Interesting. So I love digging into your ethos. It's great. So, what advice would you give to somebody, the new guy on the street, Johnny on the street that wants to start a podcast and has no idea how to do it and no idea what the time, constraints. So what kind of advice would you give to that person?
The first piece of advice I would give is think about what your idea is and then ask 2 questions. Number 1, do people want to hear it? Does anyone care? And number 2, is anyone already doing it? And if so, why would I listen to you instead? So the first couple of weeks when I was walking my dog endlessly, when I wanted to get this podcast up and off the ground, I listened to every Phish podcast out there, every podcast that was tagged with the hashtag Phish or keyword Phish. And I thought, did someone already think of my idea? Is it out there? And so would I be able to provide anything that's worth listening to? And after listening to literally hundreds of episodes of different podcasts, no one was doing what I was doing. No one was having people on just to hear their origin stories or to tell about a special show that meant something to them. That's what I want to hear about. I want to know what it was like to be there.
That's
which is what the title comes from.
Yeah, I mean, that's really cool. And I will say, just as someone that's been a guest on your show, it is a really interesting and unique thought process because, a little in the weeds about us, but, I didn't come to Phish until much later. And my first show is still my favorite show. And it's the show that I kind of compare to all other shows. And so it was really fun to go back and re-listen to the show again and still feel all the feels and still, it made me happy to do it. And so it is really a cool way to revisit something that was super important in your life. And you're right. I mean, before I did your show, I went and I also looked at a bunch of other Phish podcasts. Most of them were like speaking Phish in a negative way, or like, I don't like the new guitar sounds or Koa 2.0, whatever it is. Yours was, number 1, very positive. It was real fun to listen to. It was really fun to do. I felt like we could have gone on forever because there's just so much to talk about. So I love that. So have an idea, see if it's been done yet. What do you do do you advertise? Like, what do you do as far as like getting the word out?
Very little advertising. It's my greatest weakness. And it's the thing I like the least about having a product or having something to promote. I don't like promoting. I'm very shy. when it comes to doing something like that. Like, I'll be at a show with friends, especially my friends Laura and Steve, who almost ritually come up for New York City shows, and they're my greatest friends. And when they come up, my friend Steve, who's much more extroverted at shows than me, and I'm pretty happy to be there, he'll be like,
Mhm.
hey, he'll like just pat like or tap the guy in front of us. We haven't made any contact with our Phish neighbors. He'll just like slap him on the back and me, hey, this dude's got a Phish podcast. And it's and like I hate it, but thank God he's doing it. But so social media is my best friend, even though it's everyone's worst enemy. So there's a lot of hashtags, and on Facebook, there's like Phish groups, depending on what.
Right, right.
There's two separate groups for teachers who are Phish fans.
Interesting. What
Right?
what
It's
groups are those? Tell me what they are.
one is called Chalk Dust Torturers
What a creative name. I love that.
and Teachers on Tour.
That's fantastic. I'm writing those down. I'm gonna
So
shout them out on the show notes for sure.
So I post in as many Facebook groups that will allow, because there's a lot of Facebook groups that don't allow promotion of any sort.
Right.
But I always email or message the mods and I say, is it all right? I I host a podcast, and every other week, would it be all right if I post a link? And if they say yes, I do it. I post on my Instagram. I don't have TikTok. I'm too old for it and not interested,
Right.
even though it is stupid not to have one. So Instagram, Twitter, or what used to be Twitter, whatever, whatever other social media there is, and Blue Sky, and that's really it. I'm
Nice.
my own worst enemy when it comes to promotion. Like, when I first got my logo together, I ordered something like 500 stickers just to give out at shows. I still have probably like 150 of them.
Really? I mean, you have
Just
a cool
because
logo.
I don't even want to give it out. I don't want to bother people.
I do love merch. So, you should at least. Do you have any t-shirts? Can you buy merch on your site? No,
No.
really. It's a cool logo, everybody. So I would say that if I could buy a shirt, I would.
Well, this is my imposter syndrome. I don't think anybody would.
Really. I mean, I'd tell you I would.
All
I'm a
right.
sucker for podcast merch and like a cool logo. So I will say to you that it's great and I would absolutely buy one. I want one of one. I want the only one out there. So if I
There's
can buy it,
two. There's two out there, because a friend of mine on a Phish message board that I've been posting on since like 2003, and a lot of the same people have been posting on it. It's like a real online community. It's like the last part of the internet not infiltrated by sex bots. So, but this guy, as a living, he screen prints. He creates shirts, t-shirts. And when I posted, that was like my beta test
Mhm.
for the podcast. I posted it there before I published it anywhere else. And this guy sent me 5 t-shirts.
Oh, that's awesome.
He didn't ask me. He didn't charge me. He just said, here are some shirts. If you ever, I mean, it was a business move on his part too, a very
Sure.
savvy one. And he said, if you ever want to create merch, let me know. Here's what they might look like.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty cool.
And so I have,
Okay, good. So I would like the third.
okay.
Speaking of money and merch, does your do you make money on it? How does it work? Like, what do you do as far as like keeping the lights on in your studio out there?
It's an expensive hobby.
Yep.
I don't make money in terms of I don't profit in any way, like
Mhm.
by a long shot off of it. But people do donate. People are very generous. And that's something about the Phish community. It's funny, at Madison Square Garden, since Phish plays there so regularly at the same, like, you can set your watch to when they're going to play at MSG every year, right around New Year's Eve. If you ask the people who work there, the ushers, the bartenders, the merch people, they'll say that they love when Phish plays there. Because even though the stereotype of the Phish fan is stuck in the mid 90s, that they're like, oh, like dead fans who swim in their own vomit and they just wear hemp necklaces. It's stuck from like 1994. That's not the case, obviously, in reality. But they'll say that Phish fans, number one, are the most calm. Like, they don't get into fights, and
Yep.
not to denigrate and generalize, but they say that country music concerts are the worst because
would
people
imagine so.
drink the most and get
Yep.
into fights, get violent. They say there's never any violence during Phish shows, and we tip the most.
It's funny, to that point about being calm. My wife and I go to a ton of concerts, right? And Phish is the only concert where the ushers will allow you to stand anywhere you want because we don't give them a problem, right? So if your buddy's got, tickets in one aisle and you have tickets in another aisle and you want to wander over by where your friend's sitting, you can just hang out there and No one fights. It's always a very, very nice, relaxed. Even after the show, when you think people be like wild and crazy, it's usually a nice experience even getting out. So yeah, you're right.
Well, it's also a very self-policing community. So
Hmm.
if you're in one aisle and your friend who doesn't have tickets for that area comes over and hangs with you, but he might be taking up too much space, or he might be blocking someone else's view, or he's in someone else's seat and he's not supposed to be there in the first place, he'll be like socially kicked out. People be like, hey man, can you get out of here? This is my seat. And we don't need to get the ushers involved. Like we don't have
Right.
to narc on anybody, you know? But the reason I mention this is because I do have a website. I mentioned it earlier, buymeacoffee.com/attendance bias, and people could just donate. They just,
Cool.
it's $5 for a cup of coffee, and it can allow you to donate however many cups of coffee you want. The most common number I get is 5. Most people donate like $25 at a shot, and it adds up. My operating yearly costs, I calculated this once, is something like $824 a year
Okay.
between all the subscription services that I use for editing and hosting,
Hmm.
the yearly Zoom subscription, and the costs, whatever it is, all the costs added together over a calendar year is about a little bit plus $800. And right now, since January, we're recording right now toward the end of the year, I have something like 360.
Wow.
So it's
Okay.
shaving. It's, I'm getting like a little haircut. Like it's buzzing the top off, but I'm not quite covering costs by a long shot.
Okay, so before we wrap this up, I want to ask you two more questions. Question number one, give me two of your favorite episodes that you've done.
Okay, so it's tough because, like a teacher would say, I love all my episodes. I don't have
Right,
favorites.
right.
But really, two of the most meaningful to me would be one, I interviewed Steve Lacy, not the musician. I know there is a musician named Steve Lacy,
Hmm.
but this Steve Lacy, of whom I'm speaking, is the news anchor for Fox 5 News at 7 and 10 in New York,
What?
WNY. And this was fairly early in my podcast. I messaged him on Instagram and I asked him, hey, I'm a big fan because when I was growing up, when I first got a TV in my room, I think I was like 10 or 11 years old. I had to have like lights off at whatever time it was, let's say 9 o'clock, right? I don't know, maybe it was 10. But my
Right.
parents would let me stay up an extra half hour later if I stayed up to watch the news.
Interesting.
And I watched Fox 5 News.
Wow.
And so it wasn't him. This was well before he was the anchor, but he now has that legacy. So this guy is in a position where it's like meaningful and sentimental to me. So I asked him, and the first thing he wrote back was, sure, let's talk about this show at in Great Woods. I think it's 7/12/99. I could be wrong, but the band hadn't played Great Woods, which is a shed, a venue in Massachusetts. They hadn't
Okay.
played there in 5 years, and they opened with Foreplay Long Time, which they hadn't
Wow.
played in forever, and it just blew the whole roof off of it. So Steve Lacy is a meaningful and important episode to me. And the other one was Prime Cuts. And
Oh,
what happened was I was so lucky that I was able to make this happen. There was I was putting together I somehow got in touch with Bob Weir's manager, or formerly, he doesn't manage Bob Weir anymore of the Grateful. But this guy was Bob Weir's road manager. He worked with Government Mule, Sam Grisman, a lot of like heavyweights in the jam band community. And he used to work at Prime Cuts when he was a teenager. He was able to put me in touch with a woman who works or who lived in Oceanside, the town in which I work.
oh yeah.
And she used to work there too. And she was still in touch with the owner and founder of Prime Cuts.
Wow.
So what I did was I was able to get in touch with both of them, and it was the first time I ever had two guests on one episode, which was tough for me. But I had to ask that, like, it was like my 14-year-old self was coming back out, and I was
Dude,
able to
that's
talk to
awesome.
them. It was like the realization of a dream. And I was able to ask them about the operations of the store and how they got all the tapers. And they told me the greatest stories. And so I was able to have the manager slash owner and an employee of this head shop that was so instrumental and was the catalyst of me getting into Phish in the first place when I was a young teenager. So that episode, for personal reasons, if you didn't grow up on Long Island, you might not like it, or
Right.
it might not be interesting to you. But for me, it's one of my favorites easily.
Dude, that's very alpha omega, like the snake
Yeah.
eating its own tail. That is a really cool. I haven't thought about Prime Cuts in probably 30 years. It's was those of you that don't know, it was one of the coolest stores ever.
Ever.
It smelled like, patchouli and lots of incense, not champa. And the amount the amount of different, you know, types of bootlegs you can get, and a Baja, those super uncomfortable knit hoodies that you could wear were amazing. Okay, last but not least, if you could do this full time, would you?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me this when I was getting my breakfast together today. And this is my nature. This is why I have imposter syndrome. This is, if you could cut to the core of my personality, it's going to be in this answer. If I already had all of my health insurance, expenses, and salary taken care of, yes,
Hmm.
I would do this. Like if I were retired, this would be the center of my life. But I know whatever it is that you make your living on becomes a source of stress at one time or another. And I would never want this podcast to ever become a source of stress. I
Ah,
always want it to be only positive and only love doing it. So if ever I were dependent on the podcast, I think that would make me stress about it. And I think that would take some of the joy out of it. So yes, but no.
well, listen, Brian, I will tell you right now, you are not an imposter. Your show is fantastic. Why don't you tell everyone where we could access it and give us any of the socials or email addresses? Where can they find you and where can they donate? I know you said it before, but we'll say it again.
Yeah, no, thank you. So the easiest way is just to go on any podcast app that you use and type in the title, Attendance Bias, 2 words, BIAS.
Hmm.
And I do have some some social media, not on TikTok, but I don't have a website. And I've found that over the years, it doesn't make a difference because people don't go to websites
Right.
for podcasts anymore. But no, but like, I'm talking about what's the name of some major podcast hosts or networks? I'm not Joe Rogan or whatever. Like
Right.
I don't tour. No one would show up. I don't have the infrastructure. So like I don't need people to find the latest or just subscribe to the podcast on whatever app you use. And then you'll know when there's a new episode out.
Awesome. And they can donate to Buy Me a Coffee at Attendance Bias. Is that what it is?
1 word, buymeacoffee.com/attendance bias as 1 word.
Okay. Well, listen, everyone go buy Brian a coffee. And if you're how can they get in touch with you if they want to get on your show?
So all you have to do is email me at attendancebias@gmail.com.
Perfect. Well, as a previous guest on your show, I can say Brian is a kind and gentle host. He's got a soft hand and he guides you to places you never thought you wanted to go. And you did anyway. The show is great. Brian, my friend, I wish you success and no stress. And I hope that one day you could do this full time and have your insurance paid for as well, too.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Dude, it's been a real pleasure, man. Thank you for also having me on your show. It's a great show.